The winter wind howled through the skeletal trees of Thornwood Forest, each gust cutting through Freya Sinclair's threadbare coat like a blade. The iron-reinforced door of the Sinclair packhouse had slammed shut behind her minutes ago, but the sound still echoed in her ears, sharp, final, absolute. She stood alone in the darkness, snow already seeping through her worn boots, her fingers clutching a small burlap sack that contained everything she owned. Behind her, yellow wolf eyes watched from the tree line. Her father, Cade Sinclair, hadn't even shifted back to human form to witness her expulsion. His massive gray wolf body remained still as stone, unfeeling as the ancient rocks that marked pack territory. Her mother's final words burned hotter than the cold biting her skin. "You were never strong enough to be a Sinclair. 20 years of wasted resources. Let the wilderness claim what we should have drowned at birth." Freya's breath came in short, visible puffs. She wanted to scream, to rage, to demand answers. But Marlowe Sinclair had already turned away, her elegant wolf form disappearing into the forest without a backward glance. The message was clear. She was alone. Freya watched until the last trace of her family's scent faded into the night. The forest pressed in around her, alive with sounds that promised danger. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. Her former pack, running free, celebrating, living their lives as if she had never existed. Her hands trembled as she opened the burlap sack. Inside, one change of clothes too thin for winter, a fire starter kit with damp flint, and a small leather pouch. The pouch contained her only true possessions, dried herbs, roots tied with sinew, and a water-stained journal filled with remedies and healing knowledge. Her grandmother, Indy Sinclair, had given her these gifts before dying 5 winters ago. The old woman had been the pack's healer, patient and kind in a world that valued only strength and dominance. A healer's first duty is to preserve life, starting with her own, Indy had told her once. Freya closed her eyes, hearing that gentle voice in her memory. Then she opened them and looked at the dark forest ahead. She was small for a werewolf, barely 5'3", with a frame that spoke of fragility rather than warrior strength. Her transformations were agonizing, incomplete, leaving her stuck in a painful half-state that made her useless in combat. But worse than any physical weakness was what she'd hidden her entire life. She was an Omega. The rarest designation among wolves, marked by a scent she'd learned to mask with her grandmother's herb combinations. In wolf society, Omegas were either treasured as pack prizes or exploited as breeding tools. The Sinclairs had chosen a third option. Disposal. Freya forced her legs to move. Standing still meant freezing to death, and she refused to make it easy for them. If they expected her to lie down and surrender, they would be disappointed. She walked deeper into Thornwood Forest, each step taking her farther from everything she'd known. The temperature dropped as night settled fully. Her teeth chattered. Her fingers went numb despite being shoved deep into her pockets. After an hour of walking, she found shelter beneath a massive oak tree. Its exposed roots created a small hollow, just large enough for her to crawl inside. She gathered pine branches and used her spare clothes to create minimal insulation. It wasn't much, it wouldn't be enough. But it was something. Freya pulled herbs from her pouch and crushed them between her palms, spreading the mixture around the entrance to her makeshift shelter. The scent would mask her presence from predators, at least for tonight. Then she huddled in the darkness, shivering, and allowed herself to cry. Silent tears that froze on her cheeks, grief for the family who had never loved her, rage at the injustice of being born wrong in their eyes, fear of the brutal reality she now faced. In the distance, she heard her family's pack running through the forest. Their howls carried on the wind, full of joy and freedom and life. They had already forgotten her. Freya pressed her face against her knees and made herself a promise. If she survived this, she would never let anyone make her feel worthless again. The first week tested every skill her grandmother had taught her. Freya discovered a small cave near a frozen stream, better shelter than the tree hollow. She moved her meager possessions there, using branches and moss to insulate the entrance. The cave was cold, damp, and dark, but it blocked the wind. Foraging became her daily obsession. She searched for frozen berries beneath snow, stripped bark from specific trees that were edible, dug through ice to find roots. Her wolf side was too weak to hunt properly, her incomplete transformations more liability than asset. She set basic snares using sinew from her pouch, placing them near rabbit trails she'd identified. The first 3 days yielded nothing. On the 4th day, she caught a small rabbit. Freya cried when she found it, overwhelmed by relief and hunger in equal measure. She made the meat last 2 days, rationing every bite, using the bones to make broth. But the loneliness was worse than the hunger. Every night she heard wolves in the distance. Sometimes she recognized individual howls, her father's deep bass, her mother's sharp soprano, her brother Breck's youthful tenor. They were 3 miles away, close enough to reach her if they wanted. They never came. The 2nd week brought a blizzard that nearly killed her. Freya woke to whiteout conditions, snow falling so thick she couldn't see 5 feet beyond her cave entrance. The temperature plummeted. Wind screamed through the forest, bending trees and tearing branches loose. She burned through her firewood in 2 days, huddling as close to the flames as possible without burning herself. On the 3rd day, the fire died. Fever set in from exposure. Freya's body shook uncontrollably. Her thoughts became confused, time stretching and compressing without pattern. She hallucinated her grandmother sitting beside her, teaching her about frostbite prevention. Keep your core warm, child. Sacrifice your extremities if you must, but protect your heart and lungs. Freya used the last of her yarrow and willow bark, making a tea with melted snow. The herbs reduced her fever just enough. She packed her hands and feet with dried moss inside her boots and gloves, creating makeshift insulation. On the 4th morning, she woke to silence. The blizzard had passed. Weak sunlight filtered through gray clouds. Freya crawled to the cave entrance and looked out at a transformed world, everything buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. She was alive. Barely, but alive. The 3rd week brought grim acceptance. Freya established a routine because routine meant survival. Mornings, she checked her snares and gathered frozen water to melt over the fire. Afternoons, she searched for anything edible beneath the snow. Evenings, she maintained her fire and rationed whatever food she'd found. Her body was wasting away. She could count her ribs through her skin, see the sharp angles of her face reflected in the frozen stream. But she was alive, and that quiet defiance sustained her. She made plans. When spring came, she would travel south, far from Sinclair territory. Maybe she could find work in a human town, use her healing knowledge without revealing her wolf nature. Maybe she could build a life where being weak didn't mean being worthless. The thought gave her something to hold on to during the darkest hours. 3 weeks and 4 days after her abandonment, everything changed. Freya was checking her snares near the frozen stream at dusk. The sun had nearly set, painting the snow in shades of orange and purple. She'd caught nothing that day and was preparing to return to her cave empty-handed when a scent hit her. She froze. Blood, strong, fresh, human metallic mixed with something darker. And underneath it, a presence so powerful her omega instincts screamed in warning. Alpha. Not just any alpha. This dominance was absolute, primal, the kind that made lesser wolves submit without conscious thought. Every survival instinct told her to run, hide, get as far away as possible. But underneath the blood and power, she smelled something else. Silver poisoning. Freya stood at a crossroads, heart pounding. An alpha in these woods could mean danger, could mean her family had sent someone to finish what winter started. Getting involved was foolish, potentially fatal. But her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory. We heal because it's right, not because it's safe. Freya followed the scent. She found him collapsed against a boulder near the stream's edge. A massive man, easily 6'4", with shoulders broad enough to block the dying light. Even unconscious, his presence dominated the space. Dark hair matted with sweat and blood. skin pale with a gray pallor that spoke of serious trauma. Black veins spreading from a wound in his side like poisoned roots. Freya approached carefully, her healer's training overriding her fear. The wound was bad. A silver blade still embedded between his ribs, 6 inches of pure metal etched with symbols she didn't recognize. For werewolves, silver was toxic, burning from the inside out. The fact that he was still alive was remarkable. But by the progression of the black veins, he had hours at most. Freya knelt beside him, her mind racing. This was an alpha, powerful and dangerous. He could kill her when he woke. She had barely enough resources to keep herself alive, let alone save someone else. But looking at him, she didn't see a threat. She saw a dying man who needed help. The decision made itself. Freya worked quickly, building a fire using the last of her good firewood. She heated her small knife in the flames until it glowed, then turned her attention to the wound. The silver had to come out. Every second it remained, more poison spread through his system. Her hands shook from hunger and cold, but she forced them steady. This required precision. One wrong move and she could kill him faster than the poison. Freya cut away his shirt, exposing the full extent of the damage. The blade had been driven deep, professionally placed to hit vital organs while avoiding immediately fatal spots. Whoever had done this wanted him to suffer. She gripped the blade's handle and pulled. It resisted, caught on bone or tissue. She adjusted her angle and tried again. The blade shifted, inch by agonizing inch. Blood welled up, hot against her frozen fingers. Finally, the silver came free. Freya set it aside and immediately packed the wound with her precious yarrow and comfrey poultice. The herbs would reduce inflammation and promote healing. She used strips torn from her spare dress to bind the wound tight. The entire process took everything she had. When she finished, the man was still unconscious but breathing more steadily. The black veins had stopped spreading, though they hadn't receded. Now came the hard part. Freya was too weak to drag him far, but leaving him exposed would kill him as surely as the silver. She worked inch by inch, pulling him toward her cave. He was heavy, dead weight that made her muscles scream in protest. It took an hour to move him 50 feet. By the time she got him inside the cave, Freya was shaking with exhaustion. She covered him with pine boughs and her own blanket, positioned him as close to the fire as safe, then collapsed beside him. Her vision blurred at the edges. She'd used her last reserves of energy. As consciousness faded, Freya noticed his chest rising and falling, steady and strong. She'd saved him. Now they both had to survive the night. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering their tracks, hiding them from the world. 2 broken souls in a cave, the abandoned Omega and the poisoned Alpha, neither knowing who the other was, both clinging to life in the merciless winter dark. Garrett Blackwell surfaced from darkness slowly, fighting through layers of pain and confusion. The first sensation was agony, silver burn radiating from his side, familiar and terrible. He'd been poisoned before, knew the feeling of toxic metal destroying him from within. Second was warmth, firelight, the smell of herbs, wood smoke, and something else he couldn't identify. Third was presence, someone nearby breathing softly. His alpha senses cataloged his surroundings before he opened his eyes. Small cave, minimal resources, rough but functional shelter. The scent of female wolf lingered in the air, but underneath it something masked, hidden. He was alive, which meant someone had treated his wound. The silver was gone. He could feel the absence of that burning poison, replaced with the duller ache of healing tissue. His weapons were gone. His position was vulnerable. Garrett opened his eyes. The cave was dim, lit only by a small fire near the entrance. A figure sat curled against the wall, fast asleep despite the cold. Female, small, painfully thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days. No pack markings, no territory scent. A rogue. But rogues didn't have the medical knowledge to treat silver poisoning. That required training, experience, resources this cave clearly lacked. Garrett studied her more carefully. She'd positioned herself near the entrance, giving him the warmer spot closer to the fire. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath pale skin. She shivered even in sleep. She'd given him her blanket. Confusion warred with suspicion in his mind. Garrett knew he should be dead. The silver had been pure, the dose carefully calculated to kill. Someone had wanted him eliminated badly enough to spend a fortune on the weapon. His last clear memory was leaving Pack territory to investigate reports of a traitor. His beta, Riker Thorne, had warned him to take more guards. Garrett had refused, confident in his abilities. Foolish pride, he'd walked straight into an ambush. How long had he been unconscious? Hours, days? And who was this woman? As if sensing his consciousness, she stirred. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharpening with awareness. She jerked fully awake, pressing back against the cave wall, putting distance between them. Fear flickered across her face, quickly masked. "You're awake." Her voice was hoarse, rough from disuse or cold. "Don't move too quickly. The silver damaged your internal organs. You need to stay still." Garrett assessed her through narrowed eyes. "Who are you?" "No one important." She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself smaller. "You were dying. I helped, that's all." "You removed silver poisoning. That's not basic first aid." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "My grandmother was a healer. She taught me." "Where is he now?" And she's dead." Garrett noticed the grief that flashed across her face, genuine and deep. He also noticed the evasion in her answer, the way she avoided giving concrete details. "Where am I?" he asked. "Thornwood Forest, about 5 miles from the nearest Pack border." "How long have I been unconscious?" 2 days. 2 days. Riker would be searching. The Pack would be in chaos. Every minute he remained missing increased the danger to his people. "Who attacked me?" Garrett already knew the answer, but wanted to hear what she'd say. "I don't know. I found you already wounded." Truth as far as it went, but limited truth, carefully controlled. "What do you want in return?" Garrett asked, watching her reaction. Her expression shifted to something weary, defeated. "I don't want anything. When you're strong enough to travel, you'll leave, that's all." The resignation in her voice caught him off guard. She genuinely seemed to expect nothing from the world. "You're a rogue," he pressed. Her jaw tightened. "I'm alone, there's a difference." Interesting distinction. Rogues were wolves who'd left their packs by choice. Her phrasing suggested something else entirely. Garrett made a decision. He wouldn't reveal his identity yet. Not until he understood her motives, confirmed she wasn't part of whatever conspiracy had nearly killed him. If she'd wanted him dead, she would have left him to the silver. If she'd wanted to ransom him, she would have contacted Pax already. She truly seemed to want nothing, which made her either the most selfless creature he'd ever met, or the most dangerous. His stomach growled, sharp and painful. He couldn't remember his last meal. "When did you last eat?" he asked, noticing how thin she was. "Yesterday." The lie was obvious in the way her eyes shifted. "There's no food here." "There's enough." Another lie, weaker than the first. Understanding settled over Garrett like a weight. She'd been starving herself to keep him alive. Used her resources, her medicine, her warmth for a stranger. Why? The question ate at him, but he filed it away for later consideration. Right now, they both needed practical solutions. "I can hunt when I'm stronger," he said. "We share whatever I catch." Suspicion clouded her features. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not strong enough to travel yet, and you're weak enough that you'll die before I recover. Neither of us benefits from that." It was logical, transactional, cold, but it was also survival. She considered his offer for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Rules," she said. "You stay on your side of the cave. I'll continue treating your wound. When you're healed, you leave. No questions about me." Agreed. Both of them were lying about their intentions to simply walk away, and both knew it. But the pretense allowed them to coexist without addressing the complicated truth. Freya changed Garrett's bandages with efficient, gentle hands. He noticed she was skilled, trained, far too knowledgeable for a simple rogue or abandoned pack member. She made tea from pine needles and herbs from her pouch, giving him the larger portion despite his protest. "You need it more," she said simply. "Your body is fighting silver poisoning. That requires energy." The tea was bitter but warm, and Garrett felt strength returning to his limbs with each sip. Night fell and temperature dropped. The fire was small, conserving fuel. Garrett watched Freya try to hide her shivering, failing miserably. "You're cold," he stated. "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." She shot him an irritated look, but said nothing. Against his better judgment, Garrett spoke again. "Body heat is more efficient than fire alone." Long silence stretched between them. Finally, carefully, Freya moved closer. Not touching, but near enough to share warmth. Both pretended it was only practical, only logical. Both knew it was the first step toward something neither could afford. In the darkness, they lay side by side. Garrett, the most feared alpha in the realm, concealing his identity. Freya, an abandoned Omega, hiding her true nature. Outside, unknown to either of them, Garrett's enforcers searched the forest in expanding grids. And the Sinclair pack reported to contacts in the Garrison pack that their offering had been successfully disposed of, left to die in winter's embrace. Lies were layering like snow. When truth came, it would shatter everything. 5 days passed, and patterns emerged. Freya woke first each morning, rebuilding the fire from embers before dawn light touched the cave entrance. She'd check Garrett's wound with practiced efficiency, noting how the black veins receded a little more each day. His alpha constitution was fighting back now that the silver was gone. Healing at a rate that would kill a normal wolf, flesh knitting together in ways that defied human medicine. Freya tried to remain clinical, professional, but her hands lingered a fraction longer each day, tracing the edges of his scars, feeling the strength returning to his body. She noticed, he noticed her noticing. Neither spoke of it. By day 3, Garrett could sit up without dizziness. By day 5, he was mobile, moving carefully but steadily. He went out to check Freya's snares and returned with 2 rabbits, the first real meat she'd had in a month. Freya tried not to devour her portion desperately, failed, and looked up to find Garrett watching her with an unreadable expression. "When did you actually last eat?" he asked quietly. 5 days ago, before I found you. You gave me all your food. You needed it more." Garrett divided the second rabbit evenly despite her protests, and they ate in silence. Conversations began to fill the quiet hours. "You know a lot about healing," Garrett observed one afternoon. "Where did you train?" "Nowhere official, just watched and learned." She deflected his questions skillfully, giving answers that revealed nothing substantial. He did the same when she asked about his past. What they learned came through observation, rather than confession. Garrett discovered that Freya was educated despite appearing to be a rogue. She knew herb lore that took years to master, had careful hands and a sharp mind. When she thought he wasn't watching, she'd read from her water-stained journal, lips moving silently as she memorized healing combinations. Freya discovered that Garrett moved like a warrior, each gesture controlled and purposeful. He commanded space without trying, his presence filling the cave in ways that had nothing to do with physical size. Scars covered his body, each one speaking of battles survived. And something about him made her Omega instincts both terrified and drawn to him in equal measure. She attributed it to general alpha presence, refusing to consider alternatives. Neither was being honest. Both were learning to read between the lies. 1 week after she'd saved him, they sat on opposite sides of the fire. Freya mended her tattered clothes with thread pulled from extra fabric. Garrett carved wooden stakes for better traps. The evening was unusually warm, the first hint of early spring in the air. Garrett broke the comfortable silence. "Why are you out here alone?" Freya's hands stilled on her mending. "That's my business." "You're starving," freezing and clearly running from something. I'm trying to understand. Long pause. Freya set down her sewing and stared into the fire, deciding how much truth to offer. My family decided I wasn't worth keeping, she said finally. They left me in the forest to die. Garrett went very still. What pack throws away their own? The kind that values strength over everything. Bitterness crept into her voice. I couldn't fight, couldn't hunt properly. My transformations were incomplete, painful, useless. I was a drain on resources. She didn't mention they were her parents. Didn't mention the Omega status or the garrison deal. Those truths were too dangerous. Visible anger flashed across Garrett's face before he controlled it. How old are you? 20. 20 years they'd kept her, raised her, then discarded her like garbage. The cruelty of it sat bitter in Garrett's mouth. He understood pack hierarchy, had enforced similar standards in his own territory. Strength mattered, weakness endangered the whole, but something about her situation felt wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. What about you? Freya asked, turning the conversation. How does someone end up stabbed with silver in the middle of nowhere? Garrett chose his words carefully. I was traveling. Got ambushed by enemies, left for dead. Partial truth. He was traveling, investigating traitors. The ambush was real. What he didn't say, he was the Alpha King, the most feared wolf in 7 territories. Kingdoms were searching for him. His absence created dangerous power vacuums. So we're both unwanted by the world, Freya said softly. Garrett looked at her across the fire, really looked, seeing past the hollow cheeks and worn clothes to the strength beneath. Maybe, he said, or maybe the world just hasn't seen what we're worth yet. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she saw not just the dangerous alpha, but someone who understood rejection. That's an optimistic view for someone who was stabbed with silver. The corner of his mouth lifted. I'm alive, that's optimism enough. Something shifted in the air between them, subtle but undeniable. That night, the cave felt smaller. Garrett noticed things he'd tried to ignore. How firelight caught in Freya's dark hair, turning it copper and gold. The curve of her neck when she leaned forward. The way she bit her lip when concentrating on her mending. Freya noticed the strength returning to his movements, the intelligence in his gray eyes. How safe she felt despite knowing she shouldn't. They were playing a dangerous game, and both knew it. Garrett's senses were sharp again, his alpha abilities fully restored. He noticed something odd about Freya's scent, layered, masked, deliberately hidden. You use a lot of herbs on yourself, he observed. Why? Panic flashed in her eyes, quickly suppressed. Medicinal, preventative. For what? Just, it's habit from my grandmother. He didn't push, but filed the observation away. She was definitely hiding something about her wolf nature. The question was whether it posed a threat. That night, Freya had a nightmare. Garrett woke to her whimpering, curled on her side, tears streaming down her face. Please, she murmured in her sleep. I'll be better, I'll be stronger, don't leave me here, please. Her mother's voice echoed in the dream, cold and final. You were never ours. You were a mistake we're correcting. Freya woke gasping, disoriented and terrified. You're safe, Garrett's voice cut through the panic, command mixed with gentleness. You're in the cave, breathe. She focused on his voice, her breathing slowing gradually. Reality reasserted itself. Sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to wake you. Don't apologize for surviving trauma. They were close, closer than they'd been before. His hand hovered near her shoulder, not quite touching. Her eyes met his, vulnerable in the firelight. A moment where everything could change. But Freya pulled back, retreating to her corner of the cave. Thank you, I'm fine now. Garrett returned to his side, respecting the boundary she'd drawn. Get some sleep. Both lay awake for hours, hyper-aware of the other's presence. Outside, spring began to thaw the forest. Ice melted in streams, revealing dark water beneath. Snow receded from southern exposures, exposing brown earth and dormant grass. Inside the cave, ice of a different kind began to melt. Two people lying to each other, lying to themselves, but finding something real in the midst of all the deception. Neither knew that tomorrow would change everything. Garrett's enforcers were one day away from finding them. The reckoning neither was prepared for approached with the dawn. Freya woke to the smell of fresh fish. Garrett had already been to the stream and back, returning with 3 good-sized trout and an armful of firewood. His wound was nearly healed now, just pink scars remaining where Silver had nearly killed him. "You'll be able to travel soon," Freya said, trying to sound neutral, failing completely. Yes, the weight in that single word spoke volumes. Neither acknowledged what they were both thinking, that this temporary arrangement had become something neither wanted to end. They prepared the fish together, working with familiar ease. Freya gutted them while Garrett built up the fire, a small domestic scene that felt too comfortable, too right. She caught herself imagining this as permanent, immediately crushed the thought. He was leaving, she was staying, this was always temporary. "Where will you go?" Garrett asked, watching her work. "You can't stay in this cave forever." "I'll manage, I've made it this far." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." He wanted to say, "Come with me." The words formed and died on his tongue. He couldn't ask that without revealing who he was, what that would mean, the danger she'd face. The words remained unsaid. Suddenly, Garrett went rigid. His head snapped toward the cave entrance, every muscle tensing. "Someone's coming," he said quietly. "Multiple wolves." Terror flooded Freya's system. "My family, did they?" No, different scent, strong, organized. He recognized it immediately, his own enforcers. "Hide now." "What? Why would I?" "Please, Freya." His gray eyes met hers, urgent and serious. "Trust me. Hide in the back of the cave and stay silent no matter what you hear." The command in his voice was absolute. Freya's Omega instincts responded before her mind could protest, and she hated herself for it even as she scrambled to the darkest corner of the cave. 6 wolves burst into the clearing outside. They shifted to human form with practiced efficiency. Massive warriors in fighting leathers, each one radiating deadly competence. The leader stepped forward first, tall, scarred, with eyes that had seen too much violence. "Your Majesty," Riker Thorne's voice was thick with relief and fury in equal measure. "Thank the ancestors." Garrett cut him off with a sharp look toward the cave entrance. Riker understood immediately. Someone was listening. He adjusted his approach. "Sir, we've been searching for 9 days." The other enforcers spread out, securing the perimeter with military precision. Jet Vance moved toward the cave entrance, disappearing inside before Garrett could stop him. Moments later, he emerged dragging Freya by the arm. She struggled against his grip. "Let go of me." "Release her," Garrett commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Carefully." Jet obeyed instantly, but positioned himself to block her escape. Freya's world tilted on its axis. 6 massive warriors obeying Garrett's every word. The way they stood at attention, military precision in every movement. Riker's term, "Your Majesty." Understanding crashed over her like ice water. This wasn't just an alpha. This was the Alpha King. She'd saved Garrett Blackwell. Riker turned his attention to Freya, his expression hard and suspicious. "Who are you?" Before she could answer, he scented the air. His eyes widened fractionally. "She's been treating him," Riker said, gesturing to medical supplies visible in the cave. "The silver tools, the herbs." He looked at Garrett. "Sire, did she?" "She saved my life," Garrett interrupted. "I was poisoned, dying. She removed the silver." Knox Mercer, another enforcer, stepped forward. He was leaner than the others, with eyes that missed nothing. "Convenient," Knox said coldly. "A rogue just happens to find you, knows exactly how to treat silver poisoning, keeps you isolated for 9 days. Freya found her voice. "I didn't know who he was." Riker's expression didn't soften. "The assassination attempt used pure silver. Only someone with intimate knowledge would know the exact dose to weaken but not immediately kill, to keep someone helpless. The implication hung in the air like poison. They thought she was part of the plot. "No," Freya whispered. "I would never." Jet returned from searching the cave more thoroughly. He held up her grandmother's journal. "Medical notes," he said, "detailed descriptions of treating silver poisoning." Then her herb pouch, including silver-neutralizing agents. Freya's protest died in her throat. The evidence looked damning even to her own eyes. "Those are for healing. My grandmother taught me." An omega. Knox had scented past her masking herbs, his wolf's nose sharp and merciless. "You're an omega, unmarked, unclaimed. That's impossible unless you're hiding." Freya's secret, protected for 20 years, exposed in seconds. She looked at Garrett desperately, silently begging him to defend her, to tell them the truth about what had happened. But his expression had closed off, becoming the mask of the Alpha King. Cold, calculating, untouchable. "She's right," Riker said, his tone final. "You don't know her, you can't verify her story." He gestured to his men. "She comes with us. If you're innocent, the investigation will prove it." "Bind her, Silver." Horror flooded Freya's system. "No, please, not Silver." But the enforcers moved with ruthless efficiency. Silver chains materialized, wrapping around her wrists with practiced speed. The pain was immediate and excruciating. Silver burned werewolves, but for omegas, it was agony multiplied. Her skin sizzled where metal touched flesh. Freya gasped but refused to scream. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "Tell them," she pleaded, looking at Garrett. "You know I helped you. You know I didn't." His face remained stone. "I know you removed Silver from my body. I know you kept me isolated. I know you hid what you are." Each word was a blade, cutting deeper than the chains. "I don't actually know anything else." The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. She'd saved him, starved for him, cared for him, given him everything she had. And he believed she'd tried to kill him. The silver chains tightened. Freya bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, fighting back tears. Then the pain, the fear, the rejection triggered something she couldn't control. Her omega nature, suppressed for so long, surged to the surface. The scent masking failed completely. The full force of unmated omega flooded the clearing. Every alpha reacted instantaneously. Riker's eyes darkened. Knox tensed. Jet actually took a step toward her before catching himself. But Garrett's reaction was strongest. His wolf roared inside him, a primal sound that had nothing to do with rational thought. "Mate." The bond slammed into him with the force of an avalanche. Absolute certainty. She was his wolf knew it, his blood sang with it. But Garrett forced it down, locked it away behind iron will. Duty before desire, truth before feeling. If she was part of the conspiracy, the bond could be faked. Omegas had manipulation abilities, rare but documented. He couldn't trust his own instincts. "We ride for the capital," Riker announced. "The Alpha King's Council will convene a trial." They prepared to leave, organizing supplies with military efficiency. Freya stood in chains, surrounded by enforcers, watching her only shelter disappear behind her. She looked back at the cave once. The small space that had been her home, the place where she'd felt safe for the first time since her abandonment. Garrett wouldn't meet her eyes. As they disappeared into the forest, Freya understood the cruel irony of her situation. Abandoned by her family to die in the wilderness, she'd survived, saved an alpha's life, and would likely be executed for the crime of being too kind. Behind them, the cave stood empty. The fire died to embers, warmth fading just like the fragile connection that had been growing between the forgotten Omega and the feared king. 3 days of travel to Blackwell Keep. Freya was kept separate from Garrett, guarded constantly by rotating pairs of enforcers. The silver chains never came off despite her wrists bleeding, skin blistering beneath the metal. She didn't speak, didn't eat, barely drank water when forced. Slipping into defeated numbness was easier than feeling the betrayal. On the third day, massive stone walls rose from the landscape. Blackwell Keep was built into the mountainside itself, black stone and iron gates, wolf banners flying from every tower. Hundreds of wolves lived in the territory. Their scent hit Freya like a wall, overwhelming her already compromised Omega instincts. Too many alphas, danger everywhere, submit or die. She fought the urge to collapse, staying upright through sheer will. They took her to the dungeons, though Riker called it a holding room with false courtesy. Stone walls, one narrow window too high to reach, locked door. But there was a bed, a basin with clean water, and blankets that didn't smell of mildew. "If you're innocent, you'll be released," Riker said coldly. "If guilty, you'll be executed. Until then, you're a prisoner awaiting trial." He left her there, alone. Freya collapsed on the bed, and everything crashed down at once. The abandonment, the struggle to survive, finding Garrett, the fragile hope she'd started to feel. And now this. She didn't cry. She was beyond tears. Just empty. Garrett's private chambers were exactly as he'd left them. Dark wood furniture, wolf pelts on the floor, weapons mounted on the walls. His council assembled within the hour. Riker, Knox, and Jet were joined by Sterling Brooks and Talon Landry. 5 of his most trusted enforcers, the wolves who'd kept his kingdom running during his absence. "Report," Garrett commanded, settling into the chair behind his desk. Sterling spoke first. "We've identified the traitors within the council. 2 high-ranking wolves, Hayes Crawford and Breck Dalton, accepted bribes from the garrison pack." Garrett's expression darkened. "Evidence. Financial records, intercepted messages, testimony from lower-ranking conspirators." Sterling slid documents across the desk. "They arranged the ambush, pure silver blade professionally crafted." "The timing was off," Riker added. "You were supposed to die instantly, but someone delayed the poison's effect." Knox leaned forward. "The Omega had the knowledge, the opportunity. She's unmarked, perfect bribe target." "And keeping you isolated for 9 days. Talon's voice was thoughtful. "She could have been waiting for instructions." Garrett studied the evidence, his mind working through possibilities. "If she wanted me dead, why remove the silver at all? Why not let me die?" "To gain your trust," Knox said, "make you vulnerable." "For 9 days, she had multiple opportunities to kill me in my sleep, poison my food, finish what the silver started. She did none of it." "Maybe she lost her nerve," Talon suggested, "or the plan changed." The mate bond pulsed beneath Garrett's skin, his wolf crying to go to her, protect her, claim her properly. But bonds could be faked. Omega manipulation was rare, but documented in old texts. He'd seen it once before, watched an Omega nearly destroy a pack with carefully constructed false bonds. Could he trust his instincts, or was he being played on the deepest level possible? "The trial will be thorough," Garrett decided. "I want every aspect of her background investigated. Find out who she really is, where she came from, why she was alone in that forest." His voice hardened. "And if she's part of this conspiracy, I'll execute her myself." The words tasted like poison, but he forced them out. Sterling and Jet left immediately to investigate. They followed the trail back to Thornwood Forest, finding Freya's cave exactly as described. Evidence of long-term survival was everywhere: basic tools, snare setups, the desperate efficiency of someone fighting to live. They tracked her scent backwards, finding the hollow beneath the oak tree where she'd spent her first night. Then farther back, to Pack territory. Sinclair territory. Cade and Marlowe Sinclair were shocked when Sterling and Jet arrived demanding information about Freya. "She died," Marlowe said, her face pale. "Weeks ago, we reported it." "Reported to whom?" Sterling's voice was sharp. Marlowe hesitated, exchanging a look with Cade. "To the garrison pack. They had requested information about our weakest member." Through aggressive interrogation, the truth emerged piece by piece. The garrisons wanted an Omega for their alphas claiming. Any Omega would do, but they'd heard rumors about a Sinclair daughter with unusual healing abilities. The Sinclairs had Freya, but didn't want the political complications of officially giving her away. So they made a deal. Report her dead, abandon her in the forest. The garrisons would consider the territorial debt settled. Everyone got what they wanted. Except Freya. Why did the garrisons want her specifically? Jet demanded. Cade looked away. Wilder Garrison is obsessed with creating superior bloodlines. Omegas are rare. He'd heard about Freya's healing knowledge, wanted to breed powerful healers. When we reported her dead, he was furious. But then, Cade trailed off. Then what? Then the assassination plot against the Alpha King arose. Wilder saw an opportunity for revenge. The picture became clearer. If the garrisons wanted Freya alive and she ended up with Garrett, two possibilities existed: incredible coincidence or deliberate placement. But the timeline didn't work. Freya was abandoned before the assassination attempt was finalized. She couldn't have known Garrett would be in that forest. The ambush location was chosen last minute, based on intelligence about his travel route. Could they have found her, recruited her, sent her back to the forest? Sterling asked. Timing's wrong, Jet said, checking his notes. She was in that cave for 3 weeks before finding the Alpha King. The garrisons had no way to predict when or where he'd be. They returned to Blackwell Keep with their findings. The evidence was complicated. Freya was genuinely abandoned, genuinely left to die. But the garrison connection raised questions that couldn't be easily dismissed. Garrett stood at his window overlooking the dungeons, knowing Freya was below in her cell. The evidence against her was circumstantial, but damning. The evidence for her innocence was equally circumstantial. And beneath all logic, his wolf howled for its mate, insisting she was innocent, demanding he go to her. But how could an Alpha King trust a bond he couldn't verify? Tomorrow, the trial began. Tomorrow, he'd have to look at her again and decide. Savior or assassin, mate or manipulator. The woman who gave him back his life, or the woman sent to end it. The council chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from all 7 territories. Alpha from each pack sat in designated seats. Territorial alphas who answered to Garrett's authority, who enforced his laws in their regions. Including Wilder Garrison. Lean, cruel-eyed, radiating barely controlled violence, he watched the proceedings with intense interest. And Cade Sinclair, looking uncomfortable in his formal attire, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Freya was brought in still wearing silver chains. She'd lost more weight during her imprisonment. Her face was hollow, wrists raw and bleeding where metal burned flesh. But she walked with her head up, refusing to show weakness. She saw her father. He turned away. She saw Garrett on his throne. He looked right at her, expression unreadable. Riker stood to read the charges formally. Freya of no pack stands accused of conspiracy to commit regicide, attempted assassination of Alpha King Garrett Blackwell, and use of healing knowledge for malicious intent. Each charge carried the death penalty. How do you plead? Freya's voice was clear despite everything. Not guilty. Knox presented the prosecution's case with methodical precision. Her medical knowledge of silver poisoning, documented in her grandmother's journal. Her presence in the exact location where Garrett was ambushed. Her Omega status, unmarked and unclaimed, inherently suspicious. The 9 days of isolation. Her connection to the Sinclair pack, who had dealings with the Garrison pack. The evidence mounted, each piece damning on its own, devastating together. Wilder Garrison was called to testify. The Sinclair pack owed us territorial debt, he said, his voice smooth. They offered information about their weakest member, an Omega with unusual healing abilities. We were interested in acquiring her for our pack's benefit. When they reported her dead, we were disappointed. His eyes flicked to Freya. Then the Alpha King was poisoned, quite a coincidence. The implication was clear. She was part of a larger plot. Murmurs ran through the assembled alphas. Freya was given her chance to speak. She stood, chains rattling, and looked directly at Cade Sinclair. I was abandoned by my parents, left in the forest to die because I was considered worthless. Cade flinched but didn't speak. I survived alone for nearly a month. Barely. I was starving, freezing, and ready to give up. Then I found a dying man. I didn't know who he was. I didn't care. He needed help, and I could give it. Cade stood abruptly. That's not how. Silence, Garrett's command cut through the chamber like a blade. She will finish. Cade sat, but the damage was done. His guilt was obvious. Freya continued, her voice stronger now. I used the last of my resources to save him. I gave him my food, my blanket, my medicine. If I wanted him dead, I had 9 days to finish the job. I could have poisoned his food, reopened his wound, done nothing, and let infection take him. Instead, I starved myself to keep him alive. Her voice broke. I saved his life, and my reward is execution for the crime of being too kind. Silence filled the chamber. Sterling presented Freya's grandmother's journal, having it examined by elder healer Greer Holloway, a neutral party from another territory. Greer was ancient, her wolf-white hair marking decades of service. This journal contains genuine healing knowledge, she testified, accumulated over multiple generations. The silver poisoning treatment is documented in the context of emergency healing, not assassination. Furthermore, the handwriting shows multiple authors across time. This is traditional healer wisdom, not recently fabricated. Jet presented the timeline evidence. The assassination plot was planned 6 weeks ago. Freya was abandoned 4 weeks ago. Unless the conspirators predicted she'd be abandoned, survive, and be in the exact spot at the exact time, she couldn't have been part of the original plot. Wilder Garrison's expression darkened as his theory crumbled. Under pressure from Garrett's direct interrogation, Cade Sinclair broke. We made a deal with the Garrison pack, he confessed, his voice hollow. They wanted information about our Omega daughter. But we didn't want the political complications of officially giving her to them. Marlowe gasped from the gallery, hearing her husband confess publicly. So we abandoned her, let nature take its course, reported her dead. Wilder surged to his feet. You told me she was dead. I paid for an Omega and you. You paid for a person. Garrett's voice was deadly quiet. Like property. The chamber went absolutely silent. That was illegal under pack law, even for Omegas. Investigation results were presented systematically. Wilder Garrison, furious about the failed Omega deal, had connected with traitors in Garrett's council. If he couldn't have Freya, he'd eliminate Garrett and seize power in the chaos. The assassination attempt was revenge for a failed transaction. Freya was never part of it. She was the catalyst by accident, the innocent variable in a conspiracy that had nothing to do with her. Garrett stood, and every eye turned to him. The charges against Freya are dismissed. She is innocent. Relief flooded through her, so intense she swayed. Wilder Garrison, you are guilty of conspiracy, attempted assassination, and illegal trafficking. Sentence: exile from all territories, all pack rights revoked. You leave before dawn or you die. Guards seized Wilder immediately. Cade and Marlowe Sinclair, you abandoned your daughter, lied to this council, participated in illegal dealings. Sentence: stripped of pack status, exiled from all territories. Both sentences were immediately enforced. Garrett descended from his throne and approached Freya directly. The chamber watched in stunned silence as the Alpha King knelt and removed her silver chains with his own hands. Her wrists were destroyed, skin charred and blistered, bleeding freely. I'm sorry, his voice was low, meant only for her. I should have trusted you. Freya looked at him, eyes empty of everything except exhaustion. You should have, she said quietly. But you didn't, that's what I'll remember. She turned and walked away, escorted by guards to the healing chambers. Justice was served, innocence proven. But the damage was done. 3 weeks passed. Freya's wrists healed slowly, the silver burns leaving permanent scars. Her weight returned gradually under the care of healers who brought her regular meals. Physical strength rebuilt. Emotional state remained numb, withdrawn. She'd been given quarters in the keep, offered the position of head healer. She accepted only because she had nowhere else to go. The forest would kill her eventually. At least here she had shelter, food, purpose. But she avoided Garrett completely. If she saw him in corridors, she turned away. When he sent messages, she ignored them. When he requested audiences, she refused. 17 times, he tried to speak with her. 17 times she denied him. Garrett's wolf was in constant agony. The mate bond pulled at him every moment, demanding completion, insisting he go to her. His temper grew short, his focus scattered. Riker finally confronted him in private. Just claim her. You're the Alpha King, it's your right. Garrett's expression was bleak. That's exactly why I can't. She deserves choice, not force. The bond is killing you both. I know. The bond had manifested physically. A mark appeared on Garrett's neck during the trial, visible proof of the mate connection. Freya's had appeared in response, a mirror image. But she covered it always, hiding it beneath high collars, refusing to acknowledge what it meant. The bond pulled, ached, demanded completion. Neither could sleep properly. Their wolves cried for each other constantly. Both suffered in isolation. Greer Holloway came to Freya's quarters one afternoon. The old healer entered without knocking, settling into a chair with the confidence of age. Child, you're killing yourself resisting the bond. Freya didn't look up from the medical texts she was studying. I don't care. That's a lie. He didn't believe in me. He made a mistake, a terrible one. Greer's voice was gentle but firm. But he's trying to make amends. It's not enough. What would be enough? Greer asked. What do you need to forgive him? The question hung in the air. Freya set down her book and stared at her scarred wrists. I need him to see me, she said finally. Not the Omega, not the healer, not the political complication, me, Freya, the person who saved him because it was right. And I need to know he'd choose me even if there was no bond, no political advantage, no benefit, that I'm worth choosing for myself. Greer nodded slowly. Have you told him this? No. Perhaps you should. The old healer left Freya alone with her thoughts. The next morning, Garrett called an emergency council. All 7 territorial alphas were summoned, along with their primary enforcers. The full assembly, reserved for matters of kingdom-wide importance. Freya was summoned as well, a direct summons from the Alpha King that she couldn't refuse. She arrived guarded, expecting political maneuvering. The chamber fell silent when Garrett stood. 3 weeks ago, I nearly made the gravest mistake of my life. He described the trial, the evidence, his choice to imprison her rather than trust her. I let fear and suspicion blind me to what was in front of me. A woman of extraordinary courage, skill, and compassion. Then he did something unprecedented. Garrett Blackwell, Alpha King of 7 territories, knelt. In front of everyone. Gasps echoed through the chamber. This was unheard of. Kings didn't kneel. But Garrett looked up at Freya, his voice raw with emotion. You saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. You gave me everything when you had nothing. And I repaid you with chains and doubt. I cannot undo that betrayal, but I can promise you this. If you choose me, not because of the mate bond, not because I'm the Alpha King, but because you want to, I will spend every day proving worthy of that choice. I will honor you not as my Omega, but as my equal, as my partner, as my queen. He held out his hand. But I won't force it. The bond can be rejected. It will hurt us both, possibly kill us both, but it can be done. So I'm asking, Freya, not commanding, not claiming by right. Will you choose me? Complete silence filled the chamber. Every alpha watched. This moment would reshape pack politics forever. An Alpha King submitting, offering choice to an Omega, breaking every tradition. And that was exactly the point. Freya looked at him, really looked. Saw past the king to the man. The man who'd held her during nightmares in the cave, who'd shared his food when he was still weak, whose first instinct had been to protect her before fear corrupted it. "You hurt me," she said clearly. "Worse than the silver, worse than my parents' abandonment. Because I'd started to trust you, and you shattered that." Garrett didn't flinch, accepting her words. "But," Freya continued, stepping closer, "I understand why. You're a king. Trust is a luxury you can't afford easily. And despite everything, when I was in that cell, starving and hurting, you know what I thought about." She was close enough to touch now. "You, whether you were eating properly, if your wound was fully healed, if you were safe. I don't forgive you yet. That will take time." Garrett nodded, accepting this truth. "But I'm willing to try. Because the man in that cave, the one who talked with me and laughed with me and shared warmth on cold nights, that man is worth choosing. So yes, I choose you, not the Alpha King. You, Garrett." He stood slowly, moving to her with careful reverence. Didn't grab, didn't dominate. Cupped her face gently. "Thank you for the chance, for everything. I'll earn that forgiveness, I promise." The kiss was soft, reverent, a vow made flesh. The bond completed. Visible light pulsed between them, their mate marks glowing with power. Energy surged through the chamber, washing over every wolf present. When it faded, they stood together equals. Garrett addressed the council, his arm around Freya's waist. "Freya is my mate, my chosen queen. Any who question her status question me. Are there any challenges?" Silence, submission from every alpha present. Even the most traditional recognized this was a new era. 6 months later, Garrett and Freya stood in Thornwood Forest. The cave where they'd sheltered was still there, but they'd come for a different purpose. Together they planted a tree, oak strong and enduring. For those abandoned, forgotten, deemed worthless. Freya said softly, patting soil around the sapling's roots. "A memorial and a promise. No one gets left behind." Across all 7 territories, healing centers had been established under Freya's direction. Places where the weak, the sick, the abandoned could find care without judgment. Garrett's rule had evolved, still strong but tempered with justice and mercy. Fear remained, but respect had replaced blind terror. Freya's hand rested on her stomach, where early pregnancy showed in the slightest curve. Twins, the healers said, rare for any wolf, unheard of for omegas. Garrett's hand covered hers, protective and gentle. "We were both left to die," Freya said, looking at the small tree. "And instead we found life," Garrett finished. "Together." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in her scent, no longer masked, no longer hidden. Just Freya, fully herself, fully free. In the distance, wolves howled, not in threat or dominance, but in celebration. Their pack, their people, their kingdom. Built on the foundation of 2 people who saved each other, who learned that true strength lies not in forcing submission, but in choosing love over fear, mercy over vengeance, partnership over dominance. The forgotten Omega and the feared king, proving together that the abandoned can rise, the broken can heal, and even the coldest heart can learn to trust again. The oak tree would grow tall and strong, its roots deep in the soil where Freya had once clawed frozen ground, desperate to survive. Now those same hands planted new life, created new hope, built a future where no one would be left to die alone in the darkness.